Good evening, everybody. Sorry we are a minute late in starting. Thanks for bearing with us. Just a few technical problems because they've done an update since we last did this, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, again, welcome everybody. We hope that you find this informative. What I want to do is to just really put some context around the Q&A first, and I'd like you to listen to hopefully what you think are key messages. And when we deal with the questions, just refer back to them, and you'll see what I mean as we go. We have a lot of questions that have been sent in, but by all means, keep firing things through. Good evening, Andrew. Nice to see you on. Good evening, Paul Burrows. I can't say hello to everybody, but welcome everybody. Everybody knows that everybody's been through a lot in the last year or so, but in 7 years here at the club, I think it's worthwhile just reflecting on what we've been through and where we are. We got relegation out of the league, which was disastrous. Back-to-back promotions, which presented its own problems, but let's not sort of bitch about those. Pitch collapse mid-season, the pandemic, which basically hit us in terms of gates, etc. And despite the support of our season ticket holders, we've given back about just over $250,000 back to season ticket holders, demotion, etc., and all that brought with us. So, quite a bit for a club to deal with. And we've said very often that what we don't want to do was to basically survive. We wanted to thrive and come out of COVID. So just a little bit about that. During that, of course, you can't dismiss the fact that we had 4 Wembley trips, back-to-back promotions, 4 playoff appearances, 3 consecutive third-round FA Cup appearances. And the club is really in a stronger place, both financially in terms of the assets that it's got. The campus is now looking great. We've got a new 3G pitch there, which is earning revenues. Prenton Park itself, we've done quite a bit of work on, including things like the pitch, of course, which is a very, very significant investment. And recently you'll have seen that our friends at Forest Green, despite being on the top of a hill, had a game called off. Well, we had people a couple of weeks ago were actually canoeing down Borough Road, but our pitch cleared of water within 10 minutes or so, I'm told. We've got new lights coming to keep the grass on the pitch, despite the fact that we live in an area that means that we shouldn't have grass on the pitch in December, Jan, Feb, etc. I think one of the other things I'd like to say is that over this course of time, we've also built some fairly strong relationships. I'm just looking at the people I'm talking about here. Wirral Borough Council, who of course were shared sponsors with us, but actually have given us much more tangible support. The 3G pitch, for example, they contributed to potentially increasing or improving the rec centre, etc. Also, SR, just a word on SR. People were looking in the press recently and saying that, are SR in trouble? Well, my previous existence is the type of case I would have worked on, and I can assure you that they're fine and in good health. They've done the hard part. They've got $1 billion of US into the kitty. They've recently done a deal with HMRC, which again means that they're fine. So, they're a very strong partner, and the reason I like them as a partner is not just because they're not a gambling company, but because they actually are invested in this region and will be invested for the long term, which is what we are. Yes, you can worry about the next 5 games, but I keep saying we're worried about the next 2,500 games, the next 50 years. So a strong relationship there. Liverpool Football Club, again, strong with them. The trust, I mention them because, they are absolutely fundamental to the relationships that we try and develop. So we are, at the moment, we're a strong League 2 side and probably a mid-table League 1 side. It's just a matter of time as to when that's achieved. So effectively, when I say to you the turnaround is done, the turnaround from when we came in 7 years ago, notwithstanding what we've been through, that's done. But the important point is that can be undone in one transfer window, and you only have to look down the road and see Derby have gone into administration. And it can happen to big clubs as well as, of course, the clubs we know too well in the Northwest. So patience is a virtue. Patience is a key virtue of leadership. And what that's about is life's about timing. So when you are talking about some of the things tonight, some of the questions, just understand that it's always about timing. It's about a balance as well between ensuring that we make progress on the field as well as progress off the field. You've got limited resources, you haven't got infinite resources, therefore you have to prioritise what you do and what you can afford to do. So that's the background. You probably don't see, you see some of the results of that over the 7 years. And I think, just to build on one of the points I made last time before we get to the questions, facts settle arguments, opinions cause them. And that's different than saying nobody should have an opinion, because of course they should, and that's right. But it has to be an informed opinion. And one of the difficulties that we have here is we can't give you all of the circumstantial stuff, all the other facts upon which you can build an opinion like that. But at least recognise that some of these opinions are less well informed than they otherwise could be. And we've actually asked you prior to this to give us your opinion on the two best players, and that's a valid opinion by you guys because you watch them and see them. So we'll come back to who's been voted the two best players since we've been here later on. But now let's get to the questions. But I just say, when we talk about it, so if we talk about why we're not doing this or not doing that, it's all in the context that we are trying to balance on-field and off-field progress.
Just before we dive into the questions, can I just mention three quick things? First is a happy 5th birthday to Nate. Happy birthday, mate. The second is just a reminder to people around the memorial match that we're planning. Obviously, during a normal season, we would have been putting obituaries and sort of mementos of people who passed away during the course of the season in the programme. But because we didn't have fans for such a long time, and even when we did, we were doing very limited runs of programmes. We wanted to do a memorial match, and we want to make it hopefully an annual thing that will just become a regular part of what we do. So please let anybody know who might not be on social media and may not have heard the message. If you know of somebody connected to the club who's passed away, then to email in their details, and we'll make sure that they are properly recognised in that programme. The other just thing that I wanted to mention that we've introduced since we last spoke to everybody is around the lottery. Just so that people are aware, the reason that we changed the lottery was so that we can control it, so that basically all the winners, all the players are local. Rather than us piggybacking off Everton's lottery, which is what we used to do. So it's now a much more Wirral-based one, and also the money will go all to Wirral-based charities. So if you can support it, that'd be brilliant. So on to the questions. There were a number of people who asked questions regarding the recruitment policy, how we recruit players. I think Mickey made a reference to having some things being changed. So just a little bit from you on that, Mark, what we're doing now and how we do recruit at the club.
It's more than just recruitment. This is a project that... to be quite honest, I've looked at maybe 1,000 businesses, literally. And, when you look at a business, you look at the processes in the business. If you look at football, and you won't find this in a book anywhere or one of these courses that the universities run on director of football, there are 3 basic processes, as I see it, in a football club. And I've been careful not to dabble in this until we were ready. So it's about timing. And the issue is the first element of the process is recruitment. And there are various facets of that. The second element of the process is development, and there are various facets of that. And the third element is management, which is what we tend to focus on. And that's not just the manager, that's all the effort and resource that goes in by way of sports science into that element of the business. Analysis and all this stuff that we increased when we came in on day one. But if you just focus on those 3 elements, the most important of those is recruitment, because elsewhere in the business we'll work on saving £1,000 here or making £5,000 there, etc. But if you sign a player on a 2-year contract and there's agents' fees and there's this and that and the other, you potentially are committing the club to £500,000. Now, if you do that without a proper process of accountability or indeed a proper process of procurement, then, I can tell you now that the business is going to be in trouble pretty damn quickly. The problem is you've got to get away from years and years of the football industry being in a way very short term in the operation, because the manager's in position. He wants to get success on the pitch. Success on the pitch may mean that he leaves the club. Success on the pitch or otherwise may mean he loses his job. So he's really focused on that, not necessarily on the long-term elements of the club. So what I've been trying to do over the last 3 years, because I didn't start with this, the job when I first came was about getting out of that league, getting out of the National League. And there was lots of other stuff to do in the club. And as we've rectified a lot of the processes in the rest of the club, we've started now on looking at I started in the autumn of 2019 in really looking at the processes of recruitment, development and management. That this year is taking much more of an active role now. And even this afternoon, I've just finished talking to guys who manage data to see how they can improve the analysis that we provide in terms of both saying what types of players we want, but equally, opposition analysis and also development of various players. So it's an holistic process. It takes a long period of time. James Vaughan has joined us to help with the recruitment. Stephen Beck will still retain with us, and he'll be in a consultancy basis, helping James get to know the market. And so we are doing a lot of things, which I can go into the detail now, but I don't think it's appropriate. It'll take up the rest of this evening if I talk through what we're doing there. The point I'm making is that lots of the stuff that we've been doing over the years, like changing the system around the academy, can't happen overnight. If you just look at the academy, it moved from a Cat 3 to a Cat 4. In a Cat 4, you've got 2 years of guys to whom you owe a responsibility, and you've got to manage out the transition out of that. That academy probably will end its life with us at the end of this season. We are transitioning out of that. There's a cost to that. There's a management of that particular process. But equally, we're looking now at how we can bring in those players that can make money for the club, or at least when they're at the club are fantastic. You look at Josh Cogley, etc., and he's the type of player that we want to pick up. We have to, at some stage, get to the point whereby people, players, agents, clubs, Premier League clubs, Championship clubs, recognise that this club is the best platform for developing players. Today, our players yes, they're going out on loan, but yes, we've also committed to a budget this year, which actually makes it quite difficult unless we put a proper Graham's programme in, which we will have done by next year, in terms of developing those players outside of the first team squad. So, if you've got 22 outfield players, it's very difficult for some of those other players at this point in time to be developed. But there is a focus on their development, and that's one of the things that, I want to make sure that we do in a professional way. So it's a very, very complex process that we got. It's called Operation Alchemy. For those who understand what alchemy is, it's a transmutation exercise. And it is something that is not just going to be finished in a day. It's been going on in part, and some of the decisions that you will have seen the outside evidence of relate to that process, but it's the last frontier. The rest of the business, we continue to move on to increase the revenues of the club. But this is the last one that makes us a much better football club. And you don't rely, for example, on someone like myself who has experience of the dressing room and experience of the boardroom. The process should be something that exists beyond the current manager, beyond any manager that sits in the job. It's a process that rests within the club. And that's always been one of the problems of football, that when a manager goes, everything gets thrown in the air and you start again. Well, that's not what Tranmere needs, in my opinion, and that's what we're seeking to change. So it's a long answer, but it's an even longer answer if you want the full detail.
So we've had a few questions in around shirts and merchandise and what's happened this year, because quite obviously it hasn't gone as smoothly as we had planned. I think the reasons for that are, there are a number of different reasons. COVID is obviously the big one. There was a government-ordered factory shutdown in Indonesia in March, which was right in the middle of the production season. So all the factories had to shut down for months. That delayed everything. Added on to that, we've had difficulties actually getting stuff shipped over here because of the knock-on from both COVID, but also bizarrely the tanker that got stuck in the Panama Canal actually messed up global shipping for many months all over the world. So our partners have actually been great in swallowing the cost of DHLing a lot of it over as soon as they've been able to get it ready. The factory shutdown doesn't just affect the actual making of the kit, though. It also affected factories in China and elsewhere that were actually producing the material from which the kit is made. And that has been yet another complication. It's unfortunate because it's our first season, obviously, with a new manufacturer. But I don't think it's something that we will see repeated. I think it was just a bizarre series of I think if you'd scripted all the things that could go wrong at the beginning of it, it would have sounded a bit far-fetched. So we don't expect to have the same problems next year. We will be putting the orders in next month for the new kit, and hopefully everything will go smoothly. We have a general question mark around the financial state of the club out of COVID and where we are financially, whether we've got enough money to fund a competitive playing budget and whether we'll have money available for the January window.
Yeah, I just take one question from Ken Orr, just back on players, and I refer back to my original context setting about balance, and I think Ken's question was, why have we got guys who are older guys, etc. Well, this is where the balance comes in, because you've got to reflect in the short term what you need on the pitch and what's available in the market, etc. And therefore, yes, you would have that. So you don't slavishly adhere to just a certain age. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the McDonald's and you've got the guys. So it is a balance, and in that balance, just to take that question, can we, have we got the cash to to have a competitive budget, without giving everything away? Yeah, in June I put an extra $500,000 in the budget. That will mean we'll probably make a loss, subject to things that may happen, cup runs and stuff like that this year. But the important point was we could afford it in terms of the cash and the reserves we've got on the balance sheet. What we can't do, and this is again about balance and getting progress on the field as well as off the field, it's about timing. I felt that was necessary to do that because we wanted to have a good season, another good season. And that was to give us the chance to do that. And that's why we've got the size of squad that we've got, which then means that we can't give because of where we're situated at the moment, we can't give all of the players beneath that immediate first team opportunities. So it is this balance all the time. In terms of where the club is, yeah, I put $500,000 extra into the budget. What that means is we've chosen not to be able to fund the programme that was there to repair and renovate the recreation centre, and we chose to actually push the 3G project because the 3G project immediately produces cash, which then goes on. So that's the type of balance that we constantly deal with. So where are we financially? In terms of this, as I said, we're fine. We can manage what we've got in front of us this season. We continue to have projects that we try to push on with our partners. Yes, we look for more equity, but we look for equity to put money into not so much the first team budget, which we can cover off and gives us a competitive budget anyway, but actually into projects that will produce cash year on year on year. Are we complacent? Absolutely not, because what we have in front of us, and I said this last summer, publicly, you're going to have a post-COVID environment, which we're seeing, and that is that you're going to have rampant inflation. You're going to have people who have lost their jobs. You're going to have people who are less confident in doing stuff. And as a consequence, we're in poor market trading conditions for all businesses, especially ones where your disposable income is spending it going to watch a football game, etc. So, we're not immune to that. And we have to sort of cut our cloth accordingly and balance it. And I'm relatively happy that where we are at this point in time is that we'll be fine. And we continue on. We've got lots of options that what we can do, and we will be able to fund a competitive budget for the foreseeable future. But I come back to what I said. The turnaround is done, but the turnaround can be undone in one transfer window. You know, if you look at what the chairman of and owner of Derby was saying in 2015, that it was the best run club financially in the Championship. 6 years later, it's in administration. You know, and you know, for me, one has to be cognizant of the fact that what you have to do is to get that balance I keep talking about, which is to build your balance sheet, not because I'm an accountant, because it gives you the chance to ride a run of bad luck. The bad luck I just talked about at the start of this, you know, pitch collapse wasn't easy and we dealt with it. But we also got a 3-sheet pitch built and we had a competitive team. So, you know, we're in relatively good shape. We're not complacent, and we know there are difficult trading conditions out there for everybody. But, you know, more than that, I can't say on that.
We've got a number of questions around some of the international stuff, whether we're still doing stuff in China, whether we intend to do more, and basically where our focus is internationally.
Yeah, the international story, I mean, to be quite honest, if you're starting a business in the teeth of a pandemic, I think an international business is not what you'd want to start up whereby you've got loads of travel, etc., and people coming over and inbound stuff. Having said that, the business is thriving. China's a difficult place to do business, and anybody who works on international business will understand that. But we still have our linkages in China. We still have our partnerships ready to produce what we want to produce. We want to move into the private sector away from the government piece there. But you know, where the real movement is in Indonesia. Today I was talking to our guys in terms of a podcast that we're doing. The British ambassador will be on it, and of course with Brexit and people promoting Britain, they've actually cracked on with they've cracked on to the idea that it isn't Liverpool and Everton and Premier League clubs you want to go into these places. It's a club like ourselves that actually cares about it, and £1 million make a big difference to us, but it doesn't even touch the sides in an organisation like Man United or Arsenal or Liverpool. So they understand that we will give better attention to that. Next week, we will have this presentation to the Mayor of Surabaya, who's replaced the previous Mayor of Surabaya, with whom we started the Indonesian business with. She's now a minister in the government there. Our own investors who came from that connection eventually, they're heavily linked in. Wandi has just been appointed as advisor. And we're talking to over 200 coaches and teachers on a 5-week podcast. They will be they've approved budgets to send. And this is where I think the staff have been brilliant, because what we did, having spent our time in 2019 and 20, we went 2019 and 18, we went to the US, so we've actually got lots of contacts in the US market. The thing is that during COVID, that investment could have been wasted, but we've kept it up, we've kept contact, we've built online capability to deliver stuff. And I was looking at some fantastic stuff this afternoon, which actually we could probably sell into the local amateur club base here. But got ongoing, and we are anticipating that when the travel restrictions come off, then we will get lots more inbound stuff as well. So, and there's stuff in Australia as we're looking at, and there's stuff in Thailand. The trick is not to spread yourself too thinly, but we have great expectations that the international business will absolutely flourish in Indonesia, and then come on stream in the US. So all of that investment, if I call it investment, it's not really investment because it's paid for itself, in as much that the investment we got from Santini, and there's possibly more investment coming from Santini, but I wouldn't want to put them on the stick for that. So, you know, I'm very confident that what we've done in that area is not wasted at all, and is put on temporary hold by COVID. But, you know, really, the lads have done a fantastic job in what they've created, and the way that they've done it and gone about it.
We've got a number of different questions coming in, which when I first list them are going to sound a bit random and unconnected, but actually they all have an underlying theme. We've had a question around the Bunny Bell bar just looking very tired, and not a great facility. We've had a question around the ladies' toilets being a disgrace and not being clean, and we've had a question around kids' facilities, and whilst we've got a great fan zone coming, hopefully, could we do something for the kids? Now, on the face of it, they probably all sound like unconnected questions, but the answer to all of them is a great example of the limitations of being in a really old stadium. The problem with the toilets are cleaned before and after every match. The issue is the whole stadium is essentially plumbed with a domestic plumbing system. That means your toilet cisterns fill up as quickly as your home one would. It was never a system that was designed for commercial premises. It can't keep up with the speed. So the first few people who use the loos, they get blocked, and the whole thing becomes a hideous mess very quickly. But the cost of stripping out the entire plumbing system and starting again would be enormous. And that's the debate that we have to have. It's the same with things like the Bunny Bell. It's the same with more kids' facilities. We would love to do more. We are completely at our limits in terms of having storage space for anywhere, or having additional space that we can put things in. And it is a real limitation of being in an old ground. So it ties together with another question that we've had in around why would anybody want to move stadium? Are we still thinking about it? And the answer is yes, we are still looking at it. It's not a foregone conclusion that it will happen, but we are looking at it very strongly. Both because we are really starting to see the issues of being in an old stadium in terms of the limitations, but also just the constant battle, with no insulation, with leaky roofs and all the rest of it. It's asbestos. It is a sort of constant ongoing battle, but also, and perhaps more importantly, it's an access issue. If we want to, for example, make the new fan park a real vibrant 24/7 location, it's going to be much easier to do that from a location that is better connected for Liverpool and the rest of Wirral than Prenton Park is. Prenton Park is not the easiest place to get to. It gets no sort of passing trade. And so all of those things are connected. And if we do get to a position in the next year or two where we say, all right, no, we're going to have to shelve the idea of moving the stadium, whether it's because we can't find the finance or the site that we've identified isn't available, then we take the decision on making bigger capital investments potentially into Prenton Park. But at this stage in time, it's not something that we can do. So hopefully that explains it a little bit.
Just a couple of points. First of all, Jerry Ellis is watching from Miami, so thanks, Jerry. Great to see that you're still interested in the club out there, and also Sammy Jones, who said come and do business in Scandinavia. I would say that in terms of international business, we've got to be not spreading ourselves too thinly, but there is a project that we've got going, which will be to leverage off the Scandinavian fans for Liverpool, but I can talk about that some other time. Just to touch on some of the stuff that Nicky was talking about there is this is again about the balance, about how we can spend our funds, etc. And there is a balance. There's a way of dealing with it. It's called PBB, priority-based budgeting, for those of you in the know. And it means that we will prioritise that which we have to do and have to spend. So it may be that there's some things you think we could do, but in terms of the budget itself, it's balanced, and we take the things that we can do when we can afford them. Just one thing here. I mean, people have talked about the ticketing system and the problems with the ticketing system, and I'm just going to touch on this because in the context of priority-based budgeting, there's the ticketing system is something that we've invested in, and there's quite a lot of interesting stats around the ticketing system. And Nicky can talk to you about those in terms of access, in terms of the speed of access, etc., and going cashless and why we're doing all of that stuff, and also about the problems in the industry generally. But one of the interesting stats that's come out this season, and I say this not to criticise, but just to put things in perspective again. When we're talking about, say, it's one of the guys who's just said, can you put a new notice a scoreboard up. And yeah, I'd love to do that. But again, under priority-based budgeting, there's lots of other things that we need to do first. And will it pay for itself? We don't know. We can't take the risk at this point in time. But whatever that costs, just listen to this for a statistic. Our average price per ticket at the GA comes out at about £14 a head. Prior to this season, it was £12 a head. And actually, what's quite interesting is that we haven't had a price rise. But because we've got the new system, people have to put the right date of birth in, etc. And so, as far as I'm concerned, when we looked at it, we have far less under 18s and we have less OAPs. And the reality is that if you look at that, you may draw the conclusion that people have been taking the concessions when they shouldn't, which sounds, well, okay, you know, it's gone from £12 to £14. But if you multiply out that right across the season, and you're talking about new ladies' toilets, you know, the cost of that to the club is about 150,000, 130 to 150,000 pounds. So it's worth just thinking about that when you think about, you know, we're struggling to get £5,000 in or 1,000 in, and you know, when you're looking at the progress that we've made around the tickets, I think you will see that that's one of the advantages of it. Some people may think that's a disadvantage. And similarly, when we tried to move and get proper investment in IT that made the gates work, we lost some of the gatemen, quite a number of the gatemen, who didn't want us to actually use that technology, which meant that we really started to account for people who came in. So that's a sad reality. It's something we accept. But I just think, again, when you look at all of the things that are being suggested, how many of those things could we do if you'd had that £150,000 for the last 7 years? And there'd be quite a few.
So we've had a lot of questions about cash on the gates and allocated seating, and it's really quite a complicated subject. So it's one that what we will do is come back to in much more detail before any decisions for the long term are made. We're currently talking to Trosk and the Trust about it. And we will put out a proper communication to explain what the issues are to people. But it's just to give you a flavour of some of the issues that we're balancing, apart from those that Mark has said. Using allocated seating means that we can increase the capacity on the ground. Now, that might not sound like that big a deal, but on average, since we came in, we've had 2 games a year when we have a sellout crowd, either because we've got a playoff game going on, or because we've got, you know, an FA Cup game against Spurs or Man United or somebody like that, or even a big pre-season friendly with Liverpool. So a couple of times a year we do sell out the ground. If we go unallocated seating, which is what we used to do, we lose 10% of the crowd capacity, and that's a regulation from the safety advisory group that is common across all football clubs. If you don't have allocated seating, you're not allowed to sell all your seats. Even when we do go to allocated seating for the big games, we still have that 10% limit imposed on us because we're not used to doing it. Our fans aren't used to doing it, and it causes chaos when we try and do it because people are used to going to sit in whatever seat they want, and the stewards have a nightmare trying to persuade people to move, etc. So moving to allocated seating allows us to sell out the stadium. Now, you might say, well, it's only 2 games a year, so does it really matter? But in cash terms, that's somewhere between £30,000 and £40,000 worth of revenue. But more importantly, if you're one of the 1,500 fans that we have to say can't get into a playoff game because we've gone because we don't have allocated seating, then you would probably feel quite strongly about it. Now, if you accept that we do allocated seating, it makes it more difficult, but not impossible, to do pay on the gate. Pay on the gate gets mixed up between, are you paying on the gate with cash or are you paying on the gate with card? And they're two, again, connected but slightly separate issues. To be very, very clear, we have no intention of stopping anybody paying on the day with either cash or contactless, at least for the foreseeable future. The only issue is whether you do that at a different point to the gate. We accept that there are some practical issues around queuing at the shops, and we're looking at putting other points around the ground where it can happen. But by not taking payment at the gates, we've managed to significantly increase the entry speed into the ground for all the rest of the fans. And to put it in context, pre-COVID, only 6% of fans were paying on the gate. That's likely, I think, to have gone down since then, because I think a lot of people have got used to, more used to buying things online during COVID. But at a maximum, it's 6% of people. But it slows all the gates down if people pay on the gate, because we have you have to have live Wi-Fi. Whenever you've got a big crowd, like a football crowd, Wi-Fi becomes unreliable because there are so many people on it at any one time. The phone signals are unreliable. So it's a really complicated issue. We do understand, and we absolutely don't want to deter anybody from taking a spontaneous decision to come and turn up on the day and buy on the day. And that's why we're working through all of those issues with Trosk and the Trust, and we will come back to everybody before we take a final position on that.
I think it's important to note that, we do actually, in terms of a lot of the fan issues, rely on the fact that we have the Trust and we have Trosk, and they're different constituencies, but they have been very reliable over the years and giving us the steer that we otherwise wouldn't have. Can I just take some of the questions that were sent in prior to this? One was from Ian Blythe. I think the Brentfords Success story has been an inspiration to all lower league clubs. Impressive performance against Liverpool, sitting ninth in the Premiership. Do you think Tranmere has the capability of replicating success such as achieved by Brentford? I have a lot of respect for Brentford. I happen to know the chief exec well, and my mate from university was responsible for the move of their ground to where it is. So I do know a little bit about the club. I like what they do, and we've liaised with them because they took a route that we've been taking over a period of time. They did it quicker than us because they had the finance to do it. We didn't. But we are exiting. They exited the academy for virtually the same reasons that we did, because their players were getting nicked, and they've managed to establish in the London area, just as we want to establish in the Merseyside and in particular the Northwest area, the ability to recruit from that locality and not have them nicked, etc. So that's one of the things they've done. What I would say is that you can't underestimate the fact that I'm looking for my notes here because I have the figures. Sorry, Nicky's just taking my notes. You can't underestimate the fact that the owner there has put a lot of cash in. So I'm very sorry if I'm a disappointment to you. But if I just look at the Championship in 1920 season, Brentford wages were 186% of turnover. That was the highest, I believe, in the Championship at that stage. So it's not done just on the basis of how they've managed the club. There's been significant investment in the club by the owner, which is fine if that's the way that you want to do it. And they've got themselves into the Premiership, and they've done a great job in terms of getting themselves into being a competitive team in the Premiership. Just in terms of the questions that have come through on safe standing, I think that's all tied in realistically. Again, through PBB, priority-based budgeting, we wouldn't do it probably at Prenton Park unless we've made the decision that that's where we would stay. Because I think that that's something that certainly... look, if we do move to a new stadium, that is something that I think that is certainly going to be debated, and that will be something I think I would be keen to see in a new stadium when we have the opportunity to do it, and to do it right, so that it works as a stadium, it works for the fans, and it works, for the club from a financial perspective, nothing else. But if it improves the fan experience, then great. What was quite interesting, I was asked on the media yesterday, just talking about the fan experience and the fans' views on things. I was asked about drinking at grounds, and having spent time organising 2004 as a competition and dealing with the police, etc., etc. Intuitively, I'm not a fan of it, and unsolicited, and it may be self-selecting as a sample, but a lot of our fans were saying that they weren't particularly keen on it. You know, things like not just the abusive behaviour, but people going to the toilet, people buying pints and disturbing this and that and the other, and then of course behaviour, the wrong type of behaviour in front of what we are, which is Wirral's Family Club. So there was a lot of animosity towards that, and I think that some of the arguments made about it being, financially better for clubs, etc. And it's not a big part, I think, of any EFL's revenue streams. The difference you get from being able to sell during the match itself. But actually, when we get to that point, if it becomes a pilot in League Two, then of course I think what we will do is again consult with the fans and find out what they want to do and try to accommodate and basically compromise as regards that. Cool.
Yeah, we've got a question about Worldwaters, and with the council cutbacks, etc., do we think Worldwaters project will come to fruition? I mean, yes, I think it will, and I think it's absolutely starting to happen now. I mean, if you've been down there recently, the difference from a couple of years ago is amazing. That there are actually loads of areas where the ground's being prepared. There are buildings to start coming up out the ground. It's not the council who are doing Worldwaters. It's Peel who are doing Worldwaters. So it is commercial developers. And I think that the timing has probably worked for them in as much as they've waited for a period where property prices in the northwest are starting to increase, and there is a housing shortage and a lot of pressure on councils to get more houses built. So yeah, I do think it will happen, and that is very much linked to the stadium plans that we have. Where we're looking at potentially putting a stadium on Bidston Moss, which is right at the head of the docks and the sort of tied into all that Worldwaters development. We've had a couple of sort of very quick questions to answer as well. One about Rover the dog, that he looks pretty shabby. Yeah, he does. It is a bit tired. We are currently trying to find a sponsor for Rover the dog and to buy a new suit. They're actually quite expensive. They're several £1,000s to get a good one. I've also got to persuade Mark that we don't need a Japanese Akita fighting dog.
Which I think is, we're talking about what type of player is a Tranmere player, and I have this tension because I actually think a Japanese Akita fighting dog would probably typify a Tranmere player. But there you go. Maybe I'm from a different era. But can I just take a couple of ones which are, I guess they're serious. Well, they are serious. The two of them which are related. There's one which, just trying to find, Anthony Phillips. What is their exit strategy? I presume that's our exit strategy. Has it changed over the last 12 months? And how long will they be owners? And what's the long-term plan? He's got a second part to his question. Seems that the club is relying heavily on volunteers. I'll come back to the first part in a bit. The SLOs are always answering questions that some might argue should be answered by an employee. Can I just say that you may recall, because I've said it many times to people, there's three elements to doing a turnaround for me. You create a breathing space, you extract the organic potential, and then you get a capital transaction, investment or whatever. The organic potential of this club includes the volunteer base. This isn't a sign of the fact that we're struggling for cash in a way. It's a way of helping when people want to help. The guys who've been cleaning up the ground, throughout the COVID epidemic, massive help to the club, save some money for the club, means again, come back into priority-based budgeting. We've got more cash to put into the playing budget. So there is that to it. So it's not about, we're struggling, that's why we're using volunteers. We're using volunteers, that's one of the assets of the club. The first question is, what's their exit strategy? Has it changed in the last 12 months? How long will it be owners? What's the long-term plan? And I'll just tie that one into another one. And that is that you've taken a lot of personal abuse on social media. has that affected your relationship with our club and its fans? And if yes, how do we repair that relationship? It's very kind of you to suggest that. I think I've said before, and I said this right at the start, that opinions can cause arguments, and I was very strong about the fact that if you've got an opinion, make sure it is a valid opinion and you're valid to have that opinion. And when I used to go into companies who were in whatever industry, and I was an accountant, they used to say to me, what do you know about our business? I said, what do you know about my business? And I had to tell them basically that their only child was ugly. So you're going into PLC boards and telling them that. You've got to be rock solid, understand the difference between an opinion and a fact, and why your opinion is a valid opinion. Is it well informed? Is it based on the best information you can get, etc., etc., etc. So it's a very strong thing that drives through me. So if I get social media abuse, and I do get it secondhand because I've literally stopped looking at anti-social media, because it gets me annoyed if I do. But if I get it secondhand, then I'm just questioning whether that's valid or whether it's not valid. And you guys have come up, and do you want to give them the results of the opinion on a player or on players? The best two players that we've had in the 7 years we've been here.
Yeah, they were voted as Connor Jennings and James Norwood.
Yep. And I might disagree with that. I don't, as it happens, but there are other candidates in there as well. Is it Macca? Is it Clarkey? Is it Varney or Norwood, etc. And so, and you can go on and go on. Is it Spearing? Is it Jay Harris? You can go on and go on. The fact of the matter is, it's an opinion, and every fan has a right, if they go to games home and away, probably a better basis for an opinion, but it's right that you should have that. And actually, I wouldn't disagree with that. What's quite interesting, if I said to you who is responsible for signing those players, there's a gentleman called Steve Beck who left the club, and I looked at social media. I didn't look at it, but the comms guys brought it into me, and they said that Stephen Beck's leaving the club. These guys are laughing about it and having a go. They knew absolutely nothing about what Steve Beck did in this place, and neither would it be. Again, coming back to, it's difficult to share information with you. Neither would I tell you, and neither would we really go into detail for trying to negotiate with an agent and this and that and the other and so forth. But he's the guy who was responsible for Norwood. He's the guy who was responsible for getting across the line Connor Jennings, etc., and many more players over the period that we've been here. So there again, here's a guy getting abused by people who didn't have a scintilla of knowledge about what the guy did in the thing and worked on hearsay. And that's the danger of anti-social media. And it could actually derail us if we bothered it too much. Look at the poem if you want to see how we respond to that. I think for me, coming back to what's the exit plan for us, I mean, subject to age and subject to health, I think, as I say, the turnaround job's done. But there's one other thing I would say. People said, Brentford, could we be a Premiership club? My view is that our potential of this club, as it stands at the moment, is probably a good League One club, which may, on a good year, get up into the Championship, but would possibly come back down fairly quickly, as it's currently configured, unless somebody's feeding it cash all the time, which is, as we've seen in many cases, which is a dangerous premise. Could it be a Championship club that's self-sustainable? The answer is yes. And I think we know a path to get there. Part of that path means that we have to attract more investment. Are we looking for more investment? All the time. We need to grow the asset base. And probably, I've said this a number of times, I've shown you the maths. We do need to move stadium to make it work and to make that stadium work, which is why we look at a stadium move, and we still are looking at a stadium move. When that happens or how it happens, we have to find the time to drive that particular project forward. So that would take us to a Championship club. Is it me? Is it Nicky who's going to be here when that happens? If it happens, we don't know. But what I will tell you is the path is the same whichever way you go. I can't see many other ways unless you find somebody who's got bottomless pockets. And people thought some of these guys, some of these Championship clubs that have gone into administration, these guys have bottomless pockets. That is not a safe way for this club to handle itself. So I think there is a route forward. The way forward, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else that takes over for us, doesn't really matter. The speed at which that happens depends on whether people are going to put equity in place, or whether, you know, we manage to pull off some of the deals that we're trying to pull off, which constantly build. And again, I come back to the start of this when I said patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue that you need as a leader, and patience is a virtue that you need as fans. One of the things I didn't say at the start, which I meant to say, is we've come through a load of crap over the last 7 years, and actually we've had some fun along the way, which shouldn't be dismissed. So that's the balance between on pitch and off pitch. But in getting through that crap, what are the things that we learned? The things that we learned were keeping together. You know, and actually when you go through COVID as a society, there's a malevolence that stalks society, and a easy and ready platform is the anti-social media that we have in this day. And we've seen it all over the place. And we shouldn't let that deflect us from the fact that if we stick together, then this club is mightily stronger. Come back stronger was the phrase we used when we went out the league, and we have, and we will continue to do so. And as I say, whether it's me and Nicky, we will hand over to whomever can take it forward, but the path remains the same. And if you want a different path, you want different owners.
Sorry, I need the questions back now.
Nicky doesn't agree with that. So.
No, I do. I was just looking at some of the questions coming in, which is around some people saying, can we have a poll on the new stadium? I think the quick answer to that, for the reasons that Mark was just talking about before, about needing it to be an informed debate, is I wouldn't want to do it tonight, because moving the stadium is a very complex thing, it's a very emotive thing, and what we would want to do is to be able to actually explain to people the pros and cons on both sides, so that we can have an informed discussion with it. Of course, it is not something that we would do without really closely involving the fans, the supporters groups, in decisions around that. So, you know, I don't want people to panic that we're suddenly going to have signed up to doing something and you won't have heard anything in the meantime. That's not the way we operate. I hope everybody knows that, and we will have a much more detailed dialogue if and when we get to that stage.
It's not going to be like Wembley, where they decided in their own wisdom to spend 850 million that they didn't have, by the way, on a stadium in the north of London, without consulting anybody who really had an interest in it, i.e. grassroots.
We have a question here from Alan Forshaw, which is about why do we not release a retained list at the end of the season like most clubs do?
It's all part and parcel of the complexity of trying to sign players. Some of these players, you know, we're negotiating with, and they may well, you know, they may well end up back with us. You know, I don't think it makes much difference in that regard. Everything that we do in terms of trying to sign players is quite there's been quite a complex set of circumstances around that, around every single window that we've had in the last 2 or 3 years, and it just hasn't been appropriate in the circumstances of the individual to do that.
I think it's also linked, though, to why we don't sometimes talk about injuries to players, and we don't update as much as some clubs do on that. Why give your opposition information that would be useful to them if you don't have to? And I can understand why fans are interested on a personal level, but actually we'll do what's best for the club, which is actually to keep other teams guessing about who we might be able to play and who we won't be able to play, because it makes life more difficult for them. There's a question from Adam Toomey on our Indonesian investors and to what extent they are involved in the business, to what extent they have a say in business decisions, etc. Adam Toomey, just around our Indonesian investors.
They're pretty passive investors in the sense of direction in terms of the club. They're active in terms of involvement. You know, I will speak to Wandi or Ruki, but Wandi generally. Virtually every 24, 48 hours. When I say speak, you know, we spoke today, but alternatively, you know, so we keep them informed on everything, and they understand it. I mean, from their perspective, as I say, they joined with us as a club because they self-praise and no praise at all. They felt it was well run, and it was a great chance to get involved in English football. You know, but it's a great relationship in that regard. They're very supportive of everything that we do. They understand, because we account to them, and we have a quarterly board meeting with them that's pretty comprehensive, probably more comprehensive than they want, but then that's because I'm an accountant. But so it's a healthy relationship. They don't push us to do things. We consult with them in terms of when there's a choice, and it's a significant choice. And they were happy with us investing in the playing budget, recognising the fact that we couldn't do the rec centre this year if that was the case. And as I say, they were there to make further investment when we needed to get that investment into the pitch. So they're great investors in that regard, but good people. The post that we put out to say that Wandi has been appointed as the advisor to the Minister for Industry in Indonesia is just a recognition of the fact that people recognise them as good people. And I think that's all the fans can ask for, is you've got some good people who are coming in as investors. I understand the concerns of why somebody on the other side of the planet interested in investing in us in a minority stake. But it is what it is. We didn't do it lightly. We went out there, as I said, I think I've said before, we had a fairly long courtship, shall we say, before they eventually invested in the club.
There's a few questions coming on screen about the fan park and why build a fan park if we're thinking of moving. The simple answer to that is one of the things that we made sure with the trust is that the fan park can actually be moved if necessary. The way it's constructed, it's actually not that difficult to pick it up and move it to a new location. So it's not that would be left behind. A couple of other quick questions. The face in the crowd thing, where people bought images of themselves to put in the stadium last year, they are available for people to pick up. They've all been kept. None of them have been destroyed or thrown away. So if you want to come and collect them, they are in the club shop, including the 10 Tony Gubbers for whoever bought those. Not sure what's going to happen with them in the future, but if you bought one and you want it back, then it's in the club shop. We have got 3 minutes left, so I'm just having a look down at the most important. There's somebody saying that you didn't answer the question about whether we've got any money for the January recruitment window. I thought you did, but somebody seems to think we didn't. So do you want to just pick that one up?
Well, are you an agent? Because if you're an agent, we haven't. If you're not an agent, we might have. I come back to, we don't publicise what we can and can't do. We don't get ourselves hostage to fortune. We'll see where we are. We know the importance of potentially attracting players in the January window if it's needed to be done. We've done that relatively successfully most seasons we've been here. But more than that, we've got a big squad.
Okay, sorry, I'm just scanning through the questions to see which ones we haven't answered.
I've just seen some. Gary Neville hasn't apologised to me, but there are other reasons he needs to apologise to me, not that one. I've just seen some of the questions again about SR and things going through. Let me tell you this: that I spent my life working in workout, and I'm fairly relaxed about SR because these guys. They've put £1 billion of investment into this business since they came, and everybody is focused on the future. They need to be here. 16% of the UK's crude comes through there. Do you really think the government in the current circumstances is going to let it fail? The agreement with a government department was a piece of cake. Well, I would say that. They would say they've worked hard at it. But it was always going to happen. And having got $1 billion, just put this into perspective, they've got $1 billion of US dollars put into it. So, the people who put that in don't think it's going to fail. And I don't know the detail, but I know that I'm pretty damn sure that, they're pretty rock solid. So I'm happy with them as partners.
I think that alarm means our hour is up, so we need to wrap up. One last question that came in. Norman Smurthwaite has been seen a number of times at the ground. What is your relationship with him?
I've said it before and earlier. There is a pathway to a championship club. If it's not us as owners, then it's somebody else as an owner. Norman's a good mate of mine. I take as I find. and he sits behind me. He gives me advice. He gives me advice on players. He gives me advice on this.
Sorry, I'm not going to let Mark carry on like that.
Norman's a good mate of mine. That's as simple as that.
Norman is somebody who enjoys football. He misses going to watch football, so he comes along to watch a game. That's the start and the finish of it.
Yeah, and he'll be the owner in about 10 minutes. Norman, if you're watching.
Okay, I think we are finished. A couple of people commented at the beginning on the fact that Mark looked stressed tonight. I can tell you that was because we couldn't get the technology to work until about...
No, it wasn't. It's because I'm a vegan and my wife had cooked me a piece of steak that I couldn't eat because we couldn't get the technology to work.
We have tried to get through all of your questions. If there are any you don't think we have answered, then feel free to email us and we will try and pick them up at the next one that we do. We will carry on trying to do these regularly. Yeah,
no, thank you for your support. I mean, it is massive in terms of helping us to keep on track. And to counter the anti-social media, which I was going to say, I'm inviting them all in to talk through their tweets and posts, and we'll sell tickets for that if you want to come along, and we'll see how much they are actually based on fact. But I don't think we'll have many people turning up, so we'll probably get nothing out of it.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with us through COVID, and here's to moving on up the table.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.